Hello, everybody. I'm JackieKCooper, and my entertainment rundown for today is not a movie review. My entertainment rundown for today is I got to reflecting back on some of the celebrity interviews that I've had. And, lately we've been interviewing some authors. I've enjoyed a lot, very much doing those. We've got some more that we're working on. But I look back in the past, and also Maxwell made this suggestion. He said, why don't you talk about some of the ones that stand out in your mind? Well, they all stood out in my mind. I'm just in awe of celebrities right and left. Whenever I get a chance to interview somebody, I'm in awe. But I did think back, and I came up with three that I'm going to give you just why they were, stuck out in my mind or in my memory. And the first is Shirley MacLaine. I hope y'all are familiar with Shirley MacLaine. She's been a star, for years and years and years. I think she won the Oscar for Terms of Endearment, which was her big movie. But she's a musical performer. She was in Sweet Charity. She was in a film with Frank Sinatra called Some Came Running, which is probably my favorite Shirley MacLaine role. But at the time I interviewed her, she was making a movie where she played the President of the United States, and Nicolas Cage was her bodyguard. And she came to Atlanta for an interview. And this was right when I was getting into doing reviews and all on television. I was working for a station in Macon, Georgia, and they were talking to me about, kind of doing it on a regular basis. And one of the selling points that I had was I had just had an interview with Shirley MacLaine. And so I had the tape, and we used that on the air. But what was funny about the interview, when I went, I was, very intimidated by Shirley MacLaine because she is such a famous star and, such a big actress. She was very nice. She answered, we sat down, two chairs side by side or across from each other type of thing, and the camera out there. And I started, asking her about the movie, asking about her career. Then we kind of got into the thing about the past lives, because she believes that you were reincarnated, in different lives. She has some, different ideas about how things work. But we were rolling along. The interview was going to be like 10 minutes long. That's the amount of time that they had allotted for me. And we had reached maybe the 7-minute point. And I asked her a question, and she looked at me and she said, "This is wrong." Okay. What? And I was kind of caught. And she said, "We need to change seats." I was like, okay. And she said, I just realized the camera is not hitting my good side. And I don't want to do the interview with not having the camera on my good side. So we changed seats, and then she said, okay, we'll need to start all over. And we started all over, and we got her from her good side, and I had the interview. That was the first time that I had ever run into any kind of situation like that. Later, since then, I've heard people say, I've gone to do things on television or be whatever, and sometimes I'd be asked, which is your good side? Well, I have no idea. But some people do. They'll say, oh, this is my good side. Oh, this is my good side. But they let it go like that. But that was my interview with Shirley MacLaine. Like I said, we got almost all the way through it, and then discovered that the camera was not on her good side. Another celebrity interview I want to tell you about is the kind that you are just in fear of. When you go to interview somebody, you never know what you're going to get. They may be in a good mood, they may be in a bad mood, whatever. But what you dread most of all is getting yes and no answers. Because you want to have a conversation, you want to be able to relate to the person, get that to the camera, make it enjoyable for people to watch. But yes and no answers, they can kill you. And several years ago, this was right after Braveheart, or when Braveheart came out. I got the chance to interview Mel Gibson. Now, at this time, there was probably anybody who was a bigger star than Mel Gibson with Braveheart. And he directed it, and he starred in it. And it was a huge success, and he was doing his publicity tour for it. And and I really worked hard, and I got a one-on-one interview with Mel Gibson. It wasn't a group of reporters sitting around at the table. I got a one-on-one interview, and again, it was in Atlanta. I drove to Atlanta and waited, and then they said, "Okay, you've got a 15-minute interview with Mel Gibson." And I went in. It was like a conference room, and he was on one side of the table, and I was on the other. And this was not a filmed interview. This was for press. I was writing it up for a newspaper, and I had a recorder. And do you mind if I tape this? No. If I taped it, and he's sitting there, and I introduced myself, and and he wasn't real receptive. And I said, "Are you happy with the film, Braveheart?" "Yes." "Okay. You also directed the film, did you not?" "Yes." I mean, that was it. No, yes. I said, "Did you enjoy directing the film?" "Yes." Okay. Was it difficult to direct yourself and act?" "No." I was dying. I had nothing. I could just see the whole, article I was going to write. And then he said yes. And then he said no. And then he said yes. It was just, I'm sure I was sweating profusely because I was getting nothing from him. And he looked at me and he said, "Would you mind if I smoked?" And I said, No, wouldn't mind if you smoked. So he took out a pack of cigarettes, lit one up, leaned back in his chair, and he said, "Okay, what else you got?" And I asked him something, and he just gave me the most beautiful conversation. He smoked his cigarette. I think he lit another one right after that one. But he was, once he had that cigarette going, he was fine. But until that point, it was Death Valley with no responses whatsoever. But I did get a good interview out of him, smoking. Everybody's against smoking now and everything. But hey, it made that yes and no, interview go into a conversation. So that was my Mel Gibson story. And finally, one of the highlights of my career was my interview with Dolly Parton. I have been a Dolly Parton fan forever. I like her movies, I like her music, I like everything about her, I like her personality. I kept thinking, one day I'll get to meet Dolly Parton, but I didn't know if I really would or not. But I got a call and said that Dolly was coming to Atlanta and that, if I wanted to, I could interview her. Again, this was for print. You didn't have the cameras, that time. And this was for a lesser movie that she made. It wasn't, Steel Magnolias or anything like that. This was one of her lesser-known movies, but I was still excited to get a chance to finally see her in the flesh and interview her. And I'm sitting in the hotel room, and the publicist, says, "I'm going to go out and, Dolly will be right in." And the door opens, and she comes in, and it's like everything was in black and white except for Dolly Parton. I mean, you've never seen hair that golden, you've never seen eyes that blue, you've never seen lips that red. It was like she was in Technicolor and everything else was in black and white. she was just stunning looking. At least she was stunning looking to me. And so she came in and said, "Hey, I'm Dolly. Have you got anything you'd like to ask me?" And I could not get words out. I was just stunned. And she said, "Come on, honey. We got to do this interview now. What question do you want to ask me?" And I was like, and she said it a couple of more times. I just could not get words to form. And finally, she looked at me and she said, "Honey, yes, they are real. Now move on." And I asked my questions and had my interview, and that's my Dolly Parton story. Dolly Parton. Shirley MacLaine, Mel Gibson, Dolly Parton. What a great life I've had. But this has been Jackie K. Cooper's Entertainment Rundown with recollections of celebrity interviews.